No matter how you might feel about this movie after you see it, and no matter how you might feel about Disney Star Wars films, there's one thing you do have to appreciate. During the movie's final third act, Han Solo shoots first. Hey everybody, this is TJR. I've just gotten back from watching Solo, A Star Wars Story. This is the second of the anthology films that will take place between each chapter saga. The last one was Rogue One. I enjoyed Rogue One. I felt that it managed to have its cake and eat it too. It played it safe by tying directly into events leading up to A New Hope, Episode 4. Yet at the same time, it took bold risks by literally having every single character who was a protagonist in the film die at the end. And if I've just spoiled Rogue One for you, well, then it's your own damn fault. You should have seen it by now. So like Rogue One, this film also plays it safe as well. After all, it's dealing with some very famous characters that we know from the original series. We've got Han Solo, we've got Chewbacca, and we've got Lando Calrissian. Unlike Rogue One, this film doesn't really take any risks. I'm not sure that it necessarily needs to, though. One thing, though, that I will say in appreciation for the film is that even though it's playing it safe, it's giving us stories about characters that we are already familiar with from the original series. It's getting more in depth into things that were mentioned in the original series, such as the Kessel Run, obviously. The film still, in spite of all this, doesn't come off as a smack-you-in-the-face Star Wars film. Even though there is a lot of the type of high, intense, high-energy action that we're used to from a Star Wars film, there is a surprising, I guess, smallness to it at the same time. There's a surprising intimacy to it. The stakes are not the type of high stakes, the huge galactic high stakes that we're used to seeing in a Star Wars film. Even Rogue One had much higher stakes on the more intergalactic level. Here, the stakes are much smaller, and the film comes off much more intimate. This is basically Star Wars crossed with a heist film and crossed with the Western movie genre. There are no Jedi in this film. There are no lightsaber battles in this film. Although during the film's third act, they do manage to give us something that is reminiscent of a lightsaber battle. I know there wasn't any in Rogue One either, but you kind of expect it a little bit more when you've got familiar characters from the original motion picture trilogy. In fact, when I think about it, for most of all of our main characters, the stakes in this film are very personal. The stakes for Han Solo are very personal. For Chewbacca, they're very personal. And for Beckett, the character played by Woody Harrelson, it's all very personal. Now, maybe I'll feel differently on a second viewing, but the first 15 minutes or so of this film opened a bit awkwardly. The opening titles felt awkward. The film opens with young Han Solo and his love, Qi'ra, kind of working in a kind of like, I don't want to say slave camp, but kind of a forced, labor home for runaways. And these scenes just leading up to where they are ready to escape kind of felt like I was watching a TV movie from the 90s. However, once we get to the point where they are just about ready to escape, suddenly the film changes tone and becomes much more cinematic, and I'm happy to say that the film from that point forward moves along rather well. If I had to pick any one thing that I feel really helped elevate this film, I would say it's the cast. Everybody really sells their part, and I mean everybody. Most notably, I want to, of course, mention the film's star, Alden Ehrenreich, hopefully I've said his name right, as Han Solo. He in no way tries to do a Harrison Ford impersonation. yet somehow he's able to sell us that he's Han Solo. He is able to evoke the character through just little subtle things in how he delivers his lines, just certain expressions on his face, how he lifts an eyebrow. It's very subtle. It is in no way an impersonation of Harrison Ford, and yet it wasn't too long where I was able to completely accept him as Han Solo. I also really enjoyed the way that Chewbacca was introduced, the whole how did Chewbacca and Han Solo meet each other. I enjoyed the way they chose to introduce that character, even though it's supposed to be a surprise, yet I could see the surprise coming a mile off. I still enjoyed it. There were two instances in the film where the movie contradicted what was set up in the very first Star Wars film. These are just minor continuity errors. They're not huge, but I can see where these two instances, one of course involves the hidden floor panels aboard the Millennium Falcon that Han and Chewie and Luke and Obi-Wan hid in during the original film. And another one involves Chewie having to be, made to look like a prisoner. And I can see where these two instances are going to really annoy some Star Wars fans who get really anal about these type of things. And of course, it's definitely going to annoy the hardcore fanatics. There is a surprise twist during the film's third act that I honestly have to say I did not see coming. We have some characters who are kind of, at best, maybe minor antagonists, and yet we find out that there's more to them than we think. One thing, though, that did disappoint me was the score for the film. The trailers, 3, 2, 1, and this may just be an expectations thing. The trailers for the film, the music in the trailers had me feeling that this was going to be a much less orchestral sounding score in a Star Wars film, and then that didn't end up being the case. This just ended up being kind of a typical orchestral soundtrack. 3, 2, 1. Who knows, maybe I might enjoy it better if I hear it again now that that initial expectation was kind of like not met, but we'll see. But yeah, I was kind of disappointed with that. I was kind of hoping that they would go in a different direction. When this film was first announced, I remember there was quite a bit of negative chatter from internet critics. There was a lot of, well, who asked for this? Why do we need this? Why do we need a Han Solo movie? And I remember thinking, well, why not? There certainly have been solo Han Solo stories in comics. Did I just say that? Solo Han Solo? Try to say that 3 times fast. But there certainly have been, these type of stories in comics, and I'm assuming in books as well. We've had, Chewbacca stories. We've had Darth Vader stories just dealing with these characters. So, why not do it in the movies too? While this is not like maybe a momentous Star Wars film, I feel like this film has laid a lot of groundwork for what could be fertile soil for a lot of other spin-off films. I certainly think we could have more Han Solo, adventures, but I also think we could have Chewbacca stories. We could have a whole film about, Chewbacca and the events of his life leading up to where he meets Han Solo in this film. There is the character of Kiara, who is Han Solo's love interest in the film. And there is a period of time where they get separated, and there's a lot of implied, you don't know what's happened to me since you last saw me. This is Kiara talking to Han Solo. There's a whole lot that's implied that we don't know about, and I think that could be a very interesting film about what happened during the time that they were separated. And speaking of Kiara, there is one thing I do want to mention here. So often in these kinds of films, a love interest is just kind of shoehorned in because it's just kind of like studios think, oh, we've got to get the women into these films, so let's just shoehorn in a love story. I've seen this in countless times in other genre pictures. But here, the love interest really plays into a lot of what's motivating Han Solo throughout the entire movie. Another interesting side note about this film, ever since A New Hope, there's always been this kind of just slight sub-theme dealing with the fact that in the Star Wars universe, droids are sort of treated like second-class citizens. Now, I realize in the real world, robots are not life forms. They are robots. They are mechanical devices. But within the Star Wars universe, there's always been this kind of metaphor. I should say droids have always been kind of used as a metaphor for second-class citizens. It's only been very subtly played out, and this has been ever since the very first movie. But here in this film, we have a character that actually kind of head-on addresses it. And it's never really been addressed in a Star Wars film. I think this is an interesting little wrinkle. And who knows, maybe from this, there are other ideas that could be explored within the Star Wars universe. Solo, A Star Wars Story is not an epic Star Wars film. It is a much more personal Star Wars film with a lot of epic action set pieces in it. I feel like the film was pretty straightforward. I normally would go see it a second time and then do a spoiler review. I really don't feel like I need to do that this time. So have you seen this movie? What did you think? I'm interested in, knowing your perspective on the film, good or bad. As always, please subscribe to the channel. Be sure to click like and be sure to click that notifications icon so you can know when I make new videos. Thanks everybody for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.